Good morning, podcasters. I have a guest today, and we're going to be discussing how the basics of improv can improve your show. Hello, everyone. I'm Fuzz Martin, and this is Good Morning Podcasters. 3 times a week, I present you with some news, skills, new tools, actionable ideas that'll help you improve your podcast by way of marketing, advertising, PR, and social media. And today is no different. It's a little different, though, because it's the first time that I have a guest on Good Morning Podcasters since I took it over from Tanner Campbell back in November. But we're going to be learning all about a skill that you can use to make your interviewing, interactions, and even your negotiations better. Scott Covelli, content manager at Epic Creative and a member of the Fish Sticks Improv comedy team, is joining me to talk about the basics of improv, how you can learn more about it, and how improv will improve your life all around. But first, today's show is brought to you by podcastpage.io. Having a home base for your podcast is imperative to your show success. That home base should be your own website. You don't want to be beholden to a social media platform because you never know when a new owner is going to come in and change everything, or when you're going to get an unwarranted content strike that takes down your whole marketing platform. Having a website serves as a main hub for your show, and Podcast Page makes it super easy. With Podcast Page, new web pages are automatically created based on your show's RSS feed every time you publish a new episode. You don't have to spend a bunch of time coding and creating. They have tons of design options, pre-made templates, and beautiful themes, along with a full drag and drop page builder. Podcast Page.io also includes a full blog. They've got guest profile pages and even intake and contact forms, as well as a voicemail widget. That's a lot of stuff, and I'm just scratching the surface. Get started today. Go to podcastpage.io, and thank you to Podcast Page for sponsoring today's episode. My homework is out of the way. Scott Covelli, writer, PR guy, content director, improv troupe member. Thanks for joining me, and thanks for wearing a tuxedo.
Oh, yeah. Hey, listen, got to dress for the part, right?
Yes.
So glad to be here. Thanks again, Buzz.
Yeah. We've worked together for a while. How long ago was it that you started doing improv?
So I've been a fan of improv for my whole life. I remember as a kid staying up past my bedtime to watch Whose Line Is It Anyway? Mm-hmm. And then even like in middle school and high school youth group growing up, we would play things that I didn't know were improv games at the time, but ended up being, like, realizing after the fact. And also, yeah, just kind of enjoying the fun of riffing and comedy and kind of having things spontaneously happen in conversation. But I've been professionally in improv for about 4 years as a part of a national improv group called Fish Sticks Comedy. We have 4 troupes across the country in Milwaukee/Chicago, Dallas, Atlanta, and Denver.
Outstanding. Mm-hmm. So what was it like that first time that you started doing improv, like officially started doing improv?
It's exhilarating. Yeah. It's so fun just being able to create something new, to go up on stage and to not really know where it's going to go, but to just trust your teammates. And I mean, that's a big part of it, is to, it's so different from, say, watching stand-up comedy where they have this prepared thing and it's honed. Everything is thought through and figured out. And there's an amazing skill in that. But in improv, it's just, let's go find something together. Mm-hmm. And it's exploration, and it's trust. And Fish Sticks is a great group, and I got to learn with them and figure out how to do it. And it was like, I remember going to a class with them and coming home and being like, there's nothing I want to talk about anymore other than this. Like, You're not going to believe what happened. It was great. So you are taking, or you have taken classes on it. You didn't just jump in and start doing it. So the Fish Sticks offers, as many places do, improv classes for, helping with ideation and team building. And then I just kind of started working with them and kind of got called up to the big leagues, I guess, from one of the classes.
During COVID, I knew that you were doing Fish Sticks Comedy. I have always had a love for the Second City, and we're bored on Zoom for forever. I decided to take some online classes, and it was really cool. Like Zoom based improv, not as cool as in person in real life kind of situations, but you still learn some of the basic rules of improv. Can you tell us like a little bit about what those rules are and what what improv is.
Yeah. So someone who's listening who doesn't know much about improv and they only know that you make it up, they're probably like, wait, rules of improv? Like, that's not a thing.
Here are the 37
right,
tried and true rules.
And you can never divert from them at all. No, so the rules are basically you have to, the one that many people have heard is yes and, which means you accept the reality that your partner or that your scene creates, and then you build on that. Some people also call it heightening, where you just take the thing that's in front of you, whether it be tangible or the situation in front of you, and you just elevate. You keep heightening and heightening. And then the other things are really just like listening and trusting. Well, I'm sure we'll talk about that more here in the next few minutes, but it's about not just having your own idea of what's going to happen. Like sometimes you'll walk into a scene and we don't have a relationship, you and I, but we need to create one. And if I say like, Grandma, it's so good to see you. And you're like, I'm not your grandma, I'm your dad. Like that's no fun. And that's like confusing to the audience. So like if I say, oh, Grandma, it's so good to see you, you've got to be like, oh, Scott, it's so wonderful. Like you have to just, you're a grandma now because I've like endowed you with that.
Yes. Thanks for making me your grandma.
Well, sorry. Yeah.
No, you don't. Rule 2, don't apologize.
Well, yeah, that's true. Yeah. That, and since I'm wearing a tuxedo and you're wearing a nightgown. That's
well, I do look like your grandma. I can see how you put that together, and you know what? It's true.
So it's not, what makes it so different from stand-up is like, I have a thing that I'm going to communicate to you and I have it all planned out.
I've practiced and I've tweaked some things. Yeah.
And with improv, it's, you've got to listen to the team and go with something that you may not have thought of even 5 seconds ago.
Yeah. And then keep heightening it until mom tells you to stop.
Yeah.
So
right. Well, it's kind of like in that show, I Think You Should Leave. Like the premise of that show is just like taking a situation. I know it's not improv.
Yeah.
But it's like taking a situation and then just like ratchet it up. Like just keep going.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. The skills that you've learned from improv don't just spill over onto the stage or in front of whomever you're performing in front of. They also spill into your work life, right?
Yes, absolutely. So I think one of the main things is listening, being a good listener in improv. And, since we're talking about podcasts, right? In interviewing someone, it's not just having a list of questions. It's about listening to what the person's saying and going off of that. And sometimes it's ripping up your sheet of questions that you have or throwing away the idea of what you thought you might be talking about and actually listening to them and engaging with them and kind of being in the moment. That's a kind of a cliche thing to say about it, but being in the moment of actually being here and we're creating something right in front of us that didn't exist before.
Right. And you're only saying that because I just edited out a portion where I was looking at my notes.
Right. Exactly. Yes.
Perfect. Now, we have, and particularly you have, actually given a number of different learning seminars to our clients, to people in our community, and really teaching them about the importance of being able to improv with somebody, but again, putting your trust in who you're working with and really working in a way that you can lean on one another and finally get to a place where you're trying to go, or we're a good place, I guess. It's not necessarily always where you're trying to go, but where it takes you, but in a way that is, I guess, cohesive and fun, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So this makes me think of a quote from James Clear. He was the author of the book Atomic Habits. I don't know if your listeners have read that book. It's a popular book, but he said, preparing for, I'm going to butcher it, but it's basically like preparing doesn't just mean preparing for a couple of different outcomes. Preparing means preparing for uncertainty. It's preparing for the I don't know what's going to happen, or like preparing for the thing that I wasn't prepared for. And I think in my line of work with public relations and with clients and with things that you can't always predict, but you have to be in a place of kind of yes-anding those situations and saying, all right, here's a curveball we've been thrown. How do we manage it? How do we make the most of it? And that kind of idea is something that anyone can benefit from, right? Is learning to be adaptable in the moment.
Those times where you don't know where something's going to go, but the two people who are communicating, or more that are communicating, understand the situation, are able to feed off each other. We've been in a number of spots where people are like, do you guys share a brain? And not only just you and me, but other people here at our office, because we'll get into a client meeting and they'll ask a question that maybe we've never been asked before. And we're able to use each other's strengths that we've learned, or use their body language to understand who's probably likely to know the answer or has a better way.
Right. You know people's strengths. You can play to people's strengths, but then you can also, you all know what the end goal is, at least in the sense of we know what success is going to look like to some degree, right? We're building towards the same thing, which in improv, it can get really tricky if someone's not playing the game, if they're only in it for punchlines, or if they're only in it for this one idea that they had, but they're not going off of, they're not listening to the other suggestions or ideas from the other team members, then it gets real clunky and awkward because they're not moving towards the same goal.
Right. They've got an agenda. And
right. They have an agenda, or they just aren't listening or whatever. And so then it becomes clear to the audience that the team isn't working towards something.
Do you ever, if you have a situation like that on stage, do you ever like stop and just say, go do stand up, bro?
Right. Yeah. Like, hey, this ain't the comedy cafe.
Hey,
like,
Bill Burr.
Right.
knock that stuff off. I'm holding a banana.
Or it'll be afterwards, and I'll say like, hey, so I kind of threw something at you, and either you didn't hear me or we didn't connect on that one. Yeah.
Waka waka waka.
Right. But then the other thing too, in that sense, is if things go wrong, there's something in improv about failing, like kind of falling with style, where you just give yourself to it, because in improv, one of the most awkward things to see on stage is someone kind of like hesitating or second guessing, or if you get a suggestion of an accent that you have to do that you can't do, well, you've got to try to do a Russian accent, or you've got to, because if you reject it because like, oh, I can't do that, that's like zero fun for the audience.
Right. Yeah. Like, sorry, folks.
So
I'm not the Russian voice guy.
Right. Like failing hard and failing with grace is, a nice part of that too.
Yeah. And that, I don't think, relating this back to podcasting, I don't think you definitely don't have to have a comedy podcast in order to use improv. It can be for all of your interviews, whether you're interviewing, the Pope.
That'd be a good get.
That would be a good get. Yeah. Like you're probably going to get some listeners. So you probably should brush up on your improv skills. No, but if you're interviewing, it doesn't matter if it's a comedian, an author, something serious just happened, being able to read that room, interact, and improvise, if you will, on the spot is important. That's if you have a guest or if you have a co-host, all those sorts of things.
Can I tell a story about a podcast I heard where I just felt like they were horrible at improv and it was real cringy?
Yeah, good morning podcasters.
So I'm not gonna go into too much detail because I don't want to
out them.
Yeah, I don't want to mudsling. But there was a podcast I was listening to. It was an interview with a musician who had recently left one of my favorite bands, and it was like his first time going on the record about what happened and all this. So this podcast, which I'd never heard of, I downloaded an episode because I'm like, oh, so-and-so is on this episode and he's going to talk about all this stuff. The episode there was zero follow-up questions or riffing or anything. And I'm sure some of it had to do with the editing of the podcast. But the guy, the interviewee, was saying this rich stuff that was begging for follow-up questions on well, how did that happen? And when was that moment? And, all this, how did that make you feel? And how does it feel with this, the band that you were in is now, more successful and all this stuff. And there were zero follow-ups. It was as though the interviewer was just going down his list. He didn't even react to the responses. It wasn't like, he didn't even do the yeah, oh, that must have been hard. And then just kept going.
Yeah.
It just was, and I'm sitting there going, no, please listen to what he's saying and throw your sheet away and just have a conversation with him. Don't just have a list of questions.
Sure. So, going down next on my list. No. I appreciate you coming on the show today. I know it's something that you kind of have to get into in order to understand it. Where if somebody wanted to get involved or start learning improv, what would you recommend they do? Let's say they don't even live near any of the fish stick places. What would somebody do if they wanted to learn more about improv?
There are definitely resources like Second City and others that have online articles that you can read about improv. But I would say if you really want to get into it, there might be a local troupe nearby who does classes. There are Zoom and virtual things that you can do, but it's nothing like getting up in front of a group of people. I promise you, the thing with improv is you get out of it what you put into it, as with many things. And if you're interested in just learning how to think on your feet or come up with ideas or listen better or be a better team member, just going and playing improv with people who even know a few improv games can really, kind of loosen you up and unlock creativity that you didn't think you had. A lot of people see me do improv and my team and they say, like, oh, I could never do that. And it's like, no, you definitely can. You just kind of have to get into it and get more familiar with it. And everyone has the ability to be creative and think on their feet. You just have to exercise that muscle.
You said before we started recording, when you first went to Fish Sticks, what did they say to you?
Oh, yeah. In the first class, they said, hey, one of the best things about improv is that you don't have to be funny. And I said, I'm in. and honestly, if you're not focused on being funny, you can get out of your head and just have real moments on stage or in an improv scene. And one of the things about real moments is that a lot of people can relate to them. And that's honestly what makes things funny, is because they're relatable. So when I knew, all right, it's not about making jokes, it's about making moments together, I thought that was great, and it took a lot of the pressure off.
Before we go, I want you to promote your new book, which is coming out.
Yeah, it's called Somehow I Manage, and it's got a picture of me on the cover shrugging. That's a joke from The Office. But I should have improv something that wasn't from a TV show. No book, not yet.
No book. All right. Well, we'll get you there.
Yeah.
Scott, thank you for coming on Good Morning Podcasters. We appreciate it. And again, for those listening, I really recommend going and exploring it. Just explore, or go watch some improv and see how that all works. Go watch, is it Don't Think Twice? Is that the name of the movie?
So there's a movie, Don't Think Twice. That's another one. It's a show on Netflix that's long form improv. It's called Middleditch and Schwartz.
Oh, okay.
It's a different kind of improv than I do. It's long form, which, that's a different podcast.
Sure.
But that's a really fun show. That's like on stage improv comedy. But Don't Think Twice is a movie about an improv troupe that you learn a lot about improv comedy in that.
Also, with Mike Birbiglia and a number of others.
Yes.
So, all right. Well, thank you again, Scott Covelli, for joining me today on Good Morning Podcasters. New episodes of this show every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You can find it all at goodmorningpod.com. You're a podcaster, so I know that you know the drill. Be sure to click the follow button so you get new episodes in your podcatcher each and every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And we'll talk to you again on Friday right here on Good Morning Podcasters.